Okay, good evening, America. Welcome once again to the Meat and Potato Show, conservative talk and awesome rock. I, of course, am your host, Christopher Mader. You know what? I'm very excited to be here back filming for the show here on YouTube. And for the 2014 has been a whirlwind roller coaster ride for all of us here on the Meat and Potatoes 2012 Conservative Media Network. We wrapped up the summer with the candidate symposium on the August 30th, and my guest calling in tonight was a gracious host there. I took the September off to move and start a new job, and now we are back here on YouTube, Facebook, Lexington Green, and we are going to be talking about a little bit of that tonight. We have set up here in what we call the bunker, because I moved. I'm still setting up my studio, but we do have windows here for gun emplacements in case FEMA and DHS decide to show up. And no, I am not kidding about that. So we have a whole new format that we're going to introduce here on the show, and we're going to expand the scope of the show and offer more ways for the audience and the guest to interact with the show. That's going to be coming out in the months ahead. That's also going to be coming out in 2015. And of course in 2016, because of the success of the candidate symposium, yes, there will be another candidate symposium, either this year or next year. There's always a off-election season that always goes on, and so we'll gauge that as it goes on. But one of the things that that I wanted to reintroduce here, something that I had done when I was on radio back at WCW, and it was called The Diatribe, and it was basically a reading from my Lexington Green blogspot. It was a great success then, and many people had written to me privately, why don't you do that? And I said, well, the format of the show would change. We were just doing the interviews. We're gearing up to 2014 and the election, so I kind of put that away. But now that we're rolling into the end of the elections and we're rolling into 2015, I decided, you know what, this is something that I think should be reintroduced. And so, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for The Diatribe. And one of the great things about The Diatribe is that when I read from this and I talk about this, is that the guest who's calling in actually gets to listen to this, and it's great for them to opine upon that, talk about the things that I had said, and it helps lead in to the interview as well. And we will get to the guest and we will introduce, it's great. As always on the Meat and Potato Show, we have nothing but great guests. And so from Jack Nicholson, from his role in Batman, this town needs an enema. And I would add a full flushing. I mean, good God in heaven. This state has gone, as Archie Bunker would say, straight into the dumper. Where in the world does a Republican dressed as a Democrat get all the press? You see, folks, we've watched this time and time again. We see the one hopeful candidate up on the stage, under the lights, in front of cameras, captured on YouTube. Talk about a guy like me, from Worcester, Mass., shoestring budget. He gets candidates to show up for a forum just by posting a Facebook page. Yet the massive party money and the massive press jilts the grassroots candidates to the equivalent of a spoiler level. I mean, who decides this crap? You know, I have to take my hat off to all those candidates who stick their necks out, take out the loans, put up their houses collateral. Why? Because they believe in this notion of constitution, of republic, of service over self to run for office. I know. I interviewed these people, many of them, from across this nation since 2010. I spoke at the candidate symposium when I gave my speech. Over 125 candidates. It's almost bittersweet. Bittersweet in that so many step up over and over and over again. And then they get shafted by the process each and every time. We talk about an election process being the secure foundation of our continued freedoms, yet we are all well aware that process is rigged and flawed. We hear about the occasional upset, and we have that collective moment of hope, but for every upset, there are countless losses. Countless losses from candidates who reflect and carry on what our founders envisioned what public service should and must be. Public service is not a career. It is a calling. It's kind of like, much like what a person would do if they were called by the church or to call in to go to the missionary. This is what our founders envisioned. This is what our founders even wrote about. But as we get molded deeper and deeper into socialism, that calling becomes clouded amidst the lights, camera, pay scale, lights, camera, action of such a position. A newly elected official soon learns the money must be mined, generated for that next election. It jades and impinges upon the idealistic candidate who wishes to fix what is wrong. Listen, I covered this with my good friend back in 2010, former candidate for Congress, Pat Barron. He ran as an independent. He came up with the idea of defining the machine. I wrote about it in my blog. I even spoke to Jeff Deal after the symposium on August 30th. He came to me afterwards and he said, "Thank you for everything." And he took me aside and he said, "You know what? It's all well and good to have these moral compasses." And he was kind of pointing to the candidates. But then you get elected. And then you end up in a world of shit creeks. And quite literally, without a paddle. You are left with dealing with what is on the docket, and your specific idea gets shifted down somewhere in the pile. You're busy raising funds, and you have very little time and very little clout to put forth your ideas. If you vote no on everything, you're seen as an outsider, and no one in Congress will work with you. Vote yes, try to compromise on some bills here and there, and the constituency that got you elected views you as a turncoat. Either way, you're screwed as a legislator. Let's take in case in point Scott Brown. You know, I view Scott Brown as a man of integrity. I know Scott Brown. I've met Scott Brown. I met his wife. I worked on his campaign. This guy was trying to navigate waters here. He soon learned in his short stint as senator here in Massachusetts that this process is a rigged nightmare. To make matters worse, when you wake up from that nightmare, you discover that your constituents are sending you emails telling you that you betrayed them. Either way, you are screwed. So, what is the incentive for a local man or a woman to run for this higher calling? In short, there is none, save the moral compass of the individual who decides to get hung out to dry in the process. Case in point, my good friend and 2014 candidate for state rep for the 13th district here in Worcester, Jackie Costas. This woman had nothing to gain from tossing her hat into the ring. She could walk away from this thing tomorrow, and no one would blame her. But she could not stand by one more day and watch her adopted nation slide into the very same nation she escaped from. I covered her campaign earlier this year, and I have the link here on the Lexington Green, and I interviewed her on my show, and that link is also on the Lexington Green. Has she been written up in the local liberal-dominated press? Well, one would think they would, right? I mean, after all, think about this. She has all the right credentials. Latino immigrant, escaped communism, took the oath of citizenship. Typical American immigrant success story, right? Sounds good, right? Right? Everything's right there, right? Except for one slight problem. She's a Republican. And more to the point, she is affiliated with a local Tea Party organization. Well, we can't have that now, can we? Interestingly, the seated Democrat, Representative Mahoney, who didn't think he would have to face a challenger, well, that's par for the course here in Massachusetts, once he got wind of Jackie Costas knocking on doors, he opened up his DNC war chest. But don't expect, Mahoney to be knocking on your door anytime soon, folks. He'll send someone to do that for you. Jackie, on the other hand, will be more than glad to meet with you personally. You see, folks, these are the people I'm talking about. The ones who beat the bricks. They meet so many people as they're knocking on the door. And my guest here, who will be talking in a few moments, he can attest to that too. They knock on the doors, they beat the bricks, they beat the streets. Then guess what? They have to get up the next day and go to their jobs. They come home exhausted, and then they go out and do it again and again and again and again. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the diatribe. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Meat and Potato Show, conservative talk and awesome rock. My great guest ran for Congress in 2012, ran for Senate in 2013. He heads up the Libertarian Party here in Massachusetts. He was a gracious, gracious guest on my August 30th candidate. Welcome to the show, Dan Fishman. Dan, thank you so much for calling into the show.
Thank you for having me, Chris. I tell you, I really enjoyed the diatribe, and I'm ready to jump right in on that if you don't mind.
This is the whole point why I reintroduced this. Go right ahead and opine on that, please, sir.
I'll tell you, one of the most important things to think about, you talk about the fact that people have this difficulty right now that, even in the case where you have a candidate who's popular, who can occasionally win, then money gets cranked up against him, and it's difficult for you to maintain that when you are a good person. One of the problems that we have right now is that I believe the country is more divided politically than has been any time since 1860.
Yeah.
And I believe the reason that is happening is because the parties are training us to be enemies. One of the things that Gary Johnson said when he ran for president was, you and I are not going to agree on everything. And we shouldn't have to agree on everything. We should only try to agree on the most important issues. 80% of us agree on 80% of the issues. That ought to be enough for us to find common ground. But what's happening right now is that the parties are so insistent on winning everything that the Democrats are training their party members to think of the Republicans as enemies. And the Republican Party is training their members to think of the Democrats as enemies. When, go ahead.
Well, here's the thing that I was, we see. I'm going to interview Mark Fisher tomorrow night, and there's always that whole thing where, we lost the primary, and then there are all these people that say, let's do a write-up. They always scramble, and so let's do this, and I will always agree that okay, we lost, that's fine, but we need to come together because what's that bumper sticker? OMG, not Coakley. Oh, God forbid we should get Coakley in. Um, but there is that. So what the hell happened here? This is what I wrote in one of my blog pieces. What the hell happened?
Well, I think that what you're saying is exactly the sort of thing I'm sort of leaning into, which is, so I want Mark Coakley to be elected. Of the 5 candidates running, she's my 4th choice, right? I mean, anybody but Scott Wisely. But,
yeah.
But, so that being said, I don't consider her my enemy. I don't think that I would take up arms to prevent her from becoming governor. If she won the election, I would be disappointed. If she won the election, I will be disappointed. But I will accept that as the will of the people and say that part of what I have to do is say, okay, this is what the people voted on. This is the system we're going to stick with for a while. In this system, let me advocate for the things that I want. But I don't want to demonize Democrats and say that they are the enemy of everything that's good, because I think that 90% of Democrats are fundamentally good people. They have good intentions. I think that the path that they want to lead us down is wrong, but I think that their intentions are good. And I want them to extend that same courtesy to us. Now here, I will admit to a little party bias. I think that we're going to have to model that kind of open-minded thinking for the Democrats, because I don't think that they are trained to think that way. Their party masters sort of give them a party think. But I think for those of us who aren't independent thinkers, we should be in that way, this sort of open-mindedness, saying, you know what? Every candidate deserves consideration no matter what. For me, as a conservative, I'm going to consider every candidate. I'm not going to vote blindly for a letter or anything like that. And when the situation comes, and we have candidates on the other side who occasionally have good ideas. So, as an example, in our Attorney General race, I was against Warren Pullman from the very beginning. The only thing that, the thing that really set it up for me is when Deval Patrick endorsed him. I'm like, whoever Deval Patrick endorses, the other guy must be somebody I would like. And it turns out the other guy was Maura Healey, who, she is not my perfect choice for the Attorney General, but if you look on her gun control issue page, the very first thing that she said is guns don't kill people, people kill people.
Yes.
So the Democratic Attorney General, something like that, that's something we should say, hey, that's something new out of there. That is something new from the other side that we don't normally hear. We should say, when we find them, things like that, let's embrace them.
Let me stop you there, because one of the things I was saying about the divisiveness that's going on here is at some point in time we have to come back and we have to find the common ground. Okay, we lost, but we have to find the common ground. We have to best people to beat out the other party. But the thing that I'm concerned about is that once again, I've already seen it on my Facebook page. I've already seen it as I'm speaking to people throughout the network. Everyone's jumping on Fisher. Everyone's saying we're going to write him in. They're already splitting the vote. And even Mark Fisher had said, stop it. Don't do it. Don't stop that. Let's back Baker. Let's get on that. And I want to talk about McCormick and Falchuk in a few minutes about that too, how they play into this. But to focus more on what you were just saying, that we've got to come together. And you just made some great points about Maura Healey, about that. We've got to find that common ground. Do we agree with everything? Of course not. Of course we don't. Of course not. But I mean, we've got to think in terms of how do we wrench control away from this one-party state that we've been living in here for so long. And so take it from there, sir, please.
Well, and so I'll tell you exactly what it is that there is some common thing that we can stand up for. And this ties into what I like to say is that, the parties and the way that they've been splitting us, the mainstream media is a party of that as well. And that the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, the mainstream media, they want you to believe that politics is a number line. And to the right is the Republican Party, and beyond that are corporations running everything. To the left is the Democratic Party, and beyond that is the state is running everything. But it's not a two-dimensional number line. Politics is three-dimensional. there's a third direction. That direction is up. That is the direction of personal liberty. And that appeals to everybody. So Dr. King said, a man can't ride your back if you're standing up. So all we have to do is stand up for liberty, and we'll find that the people who we are standing up with, we have a lot more in common with them. The idea of we ought to be able to run our own lives. And that's not a right or a left issue. And what we find is that there is actually overlap on some of these issues. So if you talk about, legalization of marijuana, that is a personal liberty issue. If you talk about being able to own your own gun, that is a personal liberty issue. And when you can get these pro-pot and these pro-gun guys standing up for personal liberty together, that's how we forged the unity coalition, but to elect us the candidates we want in office.
It seems, though, that everyone's jaded as far as they don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to, have something come back against them in the press. There's always that gotcha questions, and this is why I'm glad you're here on the Meat and Potato Show. You know how we do my format. There's no gotcha questions. It's a conversation. I think they're afraid of that. They're afraid to make a definitive point here. I stand for this, that, and the other thing. And I think sometimes they're afraid that what's the liberal press going to do about that? Go ahead.
Right. Well, and I think that one of the things that we can do about that is that we talk about the idea that liberty should be our guide. The flip side of liberty is tolerance.
Right.
And that's something that we don't talk about a lot on the conservative side of things, because what we have to understand is that I don't have any liberty unless the community tolerates me exercising that liberty.
Right.
The community is bigger than me, stronger than me, and they have to tolerate it. But what we also have to understand is that you'll hear a lot of Democrats in Massachusetts say that they're tolerant because they support same-sex marriage. That's not tolerant. Everybody in Massachusetts, or most people in Massachusetts, support same-sex marriage. Show me that you're tolerant by supporting my right to have a gun in my house. Show me you're tolerant by saying that you're tolerating me doing things that you may not approve of, but you don't think the government should stop me from doing.
I call it selective outrage. It's like, well, we're for this, but we're not for that. Well, we're for this, but we're not for that. It's always selective outrage. And as far as the gay marriage thing, as a conservative, quite literally myself, as I call myself a constitutional conservative, I have this, about gay marriage, I have this attitude of, I don't care. And I don't mean like, I don't care. No, I mean, I don't care because I'm a constitutionalist. You guys go off and do whatever the hell you want to do. I don't care. Just go do it. Hey, and I'm having a barbecue next week. Why don't you guys show up? It's like, I don't care.
And we say that all the time, saying that when you're a true liberty candidate, you never have to apologize. You never have to worry about saying the wrong thing.
Right.
Because liberty is always your guide.
Right. Liberty is always your guide.
What happened, you talk about the Defense of Marriage Act, right? Who signed the Defense of Marriage Act? Bill Clinton, right? The Defense of Marriage Act that essentially, was the most anti-gay marriage thing that was ever passed, was signed by a Democrat or Republican Congress. Libertarians came out against it immediately because they said, you know what? We don't think government has anything to do with marriage. We don't have no comment one way or the other on the right of gay marriage. What we have a comment on is government, and government getting into the church's business, that's a mistake. Marriage is a province of the church.
And
right? If you want to have a religious service, have whatever religious service you want, and where government does become involved is to protect the rights of churches to treat marriage however they want. If your church says only straight people can get married, government should enforce that. Nobody should be able to
here's the thing.
marry anybody.
Here's the thing. You just said that. The Libertarians came out against Bill Clinton signing that thing. Because you're right. Government has no right saying that. But I'm sure the press even said, oh, look at the Libertarians. Oh, they're against. See, it's always this pigeonholing. And what people fail to understand, which is one of the foundations of the show, is like, government has no right to do any of this in the first place. There's no reason for you to be even involved in this. This is a private, I'm sorry, it's called the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. Whatever is not written in the Constitution, yeah, you're not allowed to do that as well. That's basically how it is. So, yeah, this whole thing about, oh, we signed the law about the Defense of Marriage Act, and then it just, what it did, okay, it placated one side, but then what ended up happening is it set into action this course of where we are today. The lawsuits, the Supreme Court suits, everything that's going on. It just created a cluster, you know what.
Exactly. And the thing about it is, how many good political candidates ended up wasting their political capital on this issue that is so irrelevant?
Right. And they got beamed by it. Oh, I'm against this, or I'm for that. Either it's like the abortion issue. If you say, well, I'm pro-choice, well, I'm pro-life, no matter which side, it's like I said in my diatribe this few minutes ago. Screw. You're screwed. I'm pro-life or I'm pro-choice. Either way, you're going to negate one half of your constituency.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, you know who I think had the best answer to that was Ron Paul.
Yeah.
When he said,
yep.
You know, here's the question. If you want to talk about a law involving abortion, when you talk about law, let's talk about the police force. And let's talk about how you're going to police this. Now, if you know a woman or a family that has had a miscarriage, you know that is among the most traumatic things that can ever happen to a family. Now, imagine the situation. They have a miscarriage, and their doctor has to report, well, you know, I know they were pregnant, they weren't anymore, and now the abortion police have to come and knock on their door and inspect them and say, you know what, we need to investigate to see whether or not you had an abortion.
Yeah.
Do we want to have the police doing that? Ron Paul said, we are never going to solve this issue through laws. We can only solve it through character. And so that's why I support people who want to advocate for pro-life stances. I support people who want to counsel, go out and talk, hold signs, all that thing. Advocate for your position, because that's what we should be about. We should be about our free exchange of ideas. But the idea that we're going to use laws, that we're going to use the force of government, that is our biggest mistake. One of the things that I say all the time is I believe that the power of government should be rare.
Yes.
And the power of government is diminished every time that we use it. So let's reserve the power of government for the things that are very important.
You know what, Dan?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
You know what, Dan? I'm wondering if I call myself a constitutional conservative. I'm wondering if I've just been a libertarian at heart all the time, because I completely agree with what you're saying. You know, all this crap. It's like, you know, I look at stuff. I've been involved in some legal stuff, some family issues, and I think to myself, and I look through the dockets and I look through the paperwork, and I think to myself, government has no right doing this. What are we even doing here? It's like, what the hell is going on? Getting back to the abortion issue, the gay rights issue, it's like, you know, I call myself a conservative, but even if Thomas Jefferson was alive, he'd be tapping me on the shoulder and he'd be saying, yeah, you're actually right. Government has absolutely no right even talking about this stuff in the friggin' first place.
Right. You're what we call a liberal.
Right.
There's a lot of overlap in there. And, you know, the thing about it is, it's not just like I want to sort of reach into the thing and say that, you know, that maybe those first few issues are just more sort of conservative issues. I want to talk about places where we have liberal overreach as well. I believe that we have changed ourselves as a country, changed ourselves as a people, that people now say when they see something wrong, when they see somebody starving in the street, they say, that's what I pay taxes for. That is a terrible commentary on our society, that we no longer care for our neighbor, that we no longer care for our community because government has gotten in the way. People have set it up so the government should take care of that stuff for us. I reject that notion, because I think that when we have a society that is built on us not caring for each other, that's when things are really going to go to hell.
Right. That's, again, Thomas Jefferson, that's what he said. Everything is, it's your responsibility as a community and as a society to take care of these people. It's not government's responsibility. Oh, God,
Exactly.
Dan, thank you for coming on the show. That's unbelievable. Dan, let's move on a little bit here. Let's
Okay.
move on. I had worked on eliminating the gas tax that
Yep.
has been, of course, it's going to be ballot question number one here.
Yep.
What was amazing is that quick story here. I ran into, in November, when we were first getting the petitions, no one knew what was going on. Nobody understood. As we explained it to them, I ran into some people that were willing to sign. They didn't agree with it. Then I ran into some people that were like, well, I like the taxes. The taxes pay for roads and everything else.
Right.
And of course, I went and I've done so much stuff on the Meat and Potato Show covering all of this. It'll take another hour and a half of radio interview
Yeah.
just to cover it. Anyway,
Sure.
so we finally got the petition signed, so we were able to go on to the next round. So in the late spring, early summer, we started getting the next round of petitions. By this time, people had been informed. They'd been watching on the news. Oh, what's this thing going on? And so they just clicked off the internet, or they watched the local news, and they got informed. And so naturally, of course, I have it right here in my hand, the ballot question that is going on. I mean, what is with our legislators that they thought in their collective insane minds that this thing would actually stand? And go ahead here.
Well, I think that, first of all, their reason for passing in the first place, in Massachusetts, the government wants to accumulate money and accumulate power. The problem with that is that when they try to do it blatantly, there are political consequences. If they raise taxes, they know that Massachusetts responds negatively to that. We have our own citizens-based initiative, Proposition 2.5, where we were able to control taxes.
I remember.
So what they did,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So what they did here was they set up a situation where taxes will go up automatically, and they feel like they don't have to face the political fallout for it. So taxes will go up, and your congressman will say, oh, I would have voted against it if I could have. I'm actually against those taxes, but darn it, they just went up automatically again, and I couldn't stop it. But we can't stop it. You and I, and then a bunch of other concerned out, getting the word out. Astonishing to me is it's working. It's resonating. We are running into people now who understand what the ballot initiative is about. I mean, it is triply worded that, what we have to do is we actually have to vote yes to get rid of the tax.
Yeah.
But I think people understand that now, and so that's good. But I'll tell you, I was out campaigning for Rick Marciano, who's running for state rep here in
Yes.
Beverly.
Yes.
And we started talking about the fuel tax. And I actually ran into a person who said, I support the fuel tax. I'm like, you support the fuel tax? Why? And he said, well, I'm an environmentalist. I think the gasoline should be more expensive so that people carpool more.
Jesus.
And I said, you know what? I disagree with you, but you are the only person that I've ever met who had a reason why it made sense other than giving more money to the government. I completely disagree with that idea. I don't think gas should go up. I think people should, pay what the market will bear. We're not about giving more money to the government. But the idea that the message is getting out there now and everybody's going to be informed,
Right.
that's critical to this.
Right. There was a write-up in Commonwealth magazine by a man named James Aloisi, and
Yeah.
I wrote a blog piece and published it not only in my blog but with the Worcester Herald and across all my social media, and that here's the thing about the gasoline tax, and because I work so closely on this, one of the things after I investigated it and worked on it, and this is the thing about what I do here on the Meat and Potato Show, I don't get involved in something unless I know exactly what I'm doing and what's going on. Here's the thing that I deduced from all of this, and it came to fruition when I interviewed Karen Anderson from Western Massachusetts, who on my show. Yeah, you know who I'm talking about, and you've seen the interview. One of the things she had said is, this is going to hurt us the most because
Right.
we live out in Western Massachusetts, and interestingly, and I told her this story. I took a vacation out there in Western Massachusetts. I went out to Tolland State Forest, and we drove out there. And I was talking to my wife. We're like driving these just west roads, and this is just Western Massachusetts. We're not like in Wyoming or whatever. But even in Western Massachusetts, we're driving these endless roads, and then suddenly we come up to an intersection. Oh, take a right here. And then we're driving more endless roads. And I thought to myself, it's like, what do the friggin' people do out here? What do they have to, if they got to go to the hospital, they got to go to the store, they got to go get milk, or they got to go get gas. I'm thinking, they got to drive 20, 30, 50 miles. It's like, well, this gasoline tax is going to screw these people. And it's not like, jobs are growing out on trees, even though there's a million trees out there. It's not like jobs are growing out on trees out there. It's like these people are going to get screwed out here.
Right, and even doubly so, you're talking about that guy who's talking about carpool, public transportation. There's no public transportation option out there. You're absolutely right. This is completely falling more on the western half of the state, which is unfair. And then the thing that Leah Cole said, who is a representative out here in Peabody, she said, listen, the worst thing about it is the legislators who pass this tax, they don't even have to worry about it because they get a per diem.
Thank you. Thank you.
So they are going to they could care less about it because as this tax goes up, their per diem is going to go up. It's completely ridiculous.
And here's the other thing too. It's indexed to inflation. And as we all know, everything gets shipped in by truck, train, plane, boat, everything else. Guess what? It all runs on gas. So every time the gas tax goes up, that means our food goes up. And then when the food goes up, oh look, the food went up. Food and clothing went up? Well, that means we have to raise the gasoline tax. Oh, automatic gas tax. Oh, isn't that nice? And guess what? It's called runaway inflation.
Yeah, and here's another thing, a great consequence of this. We talk about unintended consequences all the time. We are moving more and more towards a delivery-based society. If you order anything from Amazon or the internet, it gets delivered by FedEx or UPS or anything like that. If you were FedEx or UPS, why would you base your fleet of trucks in Massachusetts when you could base them in Rhode Island and New Hampshire, still cover the same area, and you wouldn't have to pay the gas tax when you fill your trucks up?
And
if you go up to New Hampshire, we're just immediately sending 2,000 jobs out.
Stop you right there. Now we start talking about the inventory tax. I work currently for a company. We have one small warehouse here in Massachusetts because we have to serve this area. And the company I work for, and in fact, the people that I work for and the managers and everything, they even spoke to me and they even asked me about this. It's like, yeah, you guys are paying higher end taxes here because you have this warehouse. Well, that's why we have this small warehouse. There are, in all my jobs that I've ever had, one of the big things that I've always done is I always work part-time. I always work part-time, punching the cash register, pumping gas, doing anything else, as well as, because that's the way it is here in America now today. You gotta work 2 jobs. So anyway, but because I'm a smart guy, I would like, well, where does your distribution come from? Oh, it comes from Connecticut. Oh, it comes from New Hampshire. Oh, it comes from Maine. Oh, it comes from New York. And I thought to myself, it's the inventory tax. There are no distribution companies here in Massachusetts because quite literally here in Massachusetts, the tax is they go into your warehouse and they count all the stuff that's in your warehouse and they tax you on it. Go ahead here, Dan.
Yeah, it's exactly what's right. And, we know that when the tax code changes, people do what they can to avoid taxes. And it's not a bad thing. It's not like these businesses are evil. The business's job is to minimize their costs.
Right.
They're not moving jobs out of the state because they're evil. They're moving jobs out of the state because they're supposed to minimize costs so they can do the best they can for their customers.
we are becoming just like California. Governor Perry has actually gone to California and advertised, come to Texas. We don't have those taxes. And guess what? California, there's like a mass exodus. In fact, I even have a euphemistic term of Massachusetts. Everyone calls it Taxachusetts. I call it tax mass exodus. Everyone's leaving the state. I mean, in fact, all the candidates that I interviewed coming up into August 30th, practically every single one of them had said, "Yeah, you're right. Since Deval Patrick, there has been no new businesses here in Massachusetts. No company has said to themselves, I want to go to Massachusetts and build my new company." Go ahead, Dan.
Right. I was going to say, we have excellent evidence of this because how many congressional seats did we have in 2010? We had 10.
Yeah, right. We're losing population. That's right.
Exactly. You know, it's clear. Nobody can argue this now. And, you know, the worst thing about it is, you know who I really feel bad for? I mean, aside from us who are here in Massachusetts, I feel bad for the people in New Hampshire because we've been exporting Democrats there as an enormous way, and it has changed their thing. I was, you know, in the Free State Organization way back in 97 when we first started talking about it. The idea that we could get 30,000 conservatives together, move to New Hampshire, and change that state government. You know what? The Democrats inadvertently did it by driving up prices. There are more Democrats in Massachusetts across the border, and it would take more than 30,000 people now to turn that state to a conservative, passive conservatism.
Well, one of the things I had said in one of my blogs is that at some point in time, what ends up happening is you no longer are talking about taxing the rich, making them, as Hiawatha Warren said, is that you don't make them pay more of their fair share. It's an oxymoron. Either you are paying your fair share or you're just paying more.
Yep.
But here's what ends up happening. Because businesses move out, because jobs move out, and people move out, what ends up is the people that are left behind. And these people that are left behind end up bearing the larger brunt of the taxation. We're talking the working poor, the welfare, the single mothers, the single fathers, the low income people. And as I
without mobility.
Without economic mobility. Exactly. Ends up happening. Then what ends up happening, and I wrote this in my blog, a scenario. Here's the scenario. You're a single mother. You work at Walmart. You make $8.25 an hour. You have 2 children. Maybe you collect child support. Maybe you have food stamps. Yes, no. Think about it. You're at that low end. You're thinking about, I gotta pay for my gas. I've got to pay for my wheel. I got to get my tires replaced because it's rubbing over here. You've got economic problems in front of you. Now, let's talk about the DMV. I was there. I filmed it. I was there. The meat and potatoes was there. They're going to raise us up 75%. Think about that single mother. I got to pay $50 for an inspection sticker, but I know I'm not going to pass because my tires are blown. Oh, that's going to be $200. I can't get that done. I can't pay for that $50 inspection sticker. I have to put food on my table. So then her inspection sticker expires. Guess what? She's driving to work to her crappy job, trying to make ends meet. And guess what? Cop pulls her over. Boom. There's another fine. Again, it's just compounded. It turns the poor people into criminals. And all it does is it just cripples these people. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, and, you know, the thing about this, you're 100% right, because when, you know, Elizabeth Warren talking about, what people's fair share is. And, the big thing that sort of sponsored that whole blow up was when Warren Buffett wrote that article about how his effective tax rate was less than his secretary's.
Yeah.
So his effective tax rate that year was 16%. He had made $42 million of income that year, which means he paid 7%. He paid $7 million in taxes. You know what? $7 million, that should be one man's share. That should be more than one man's share.
Sure.
I don't care what his income is.
Yeah.
If the government requires you to pay more than $7 million, what we're setting up is an idea that you and I are not equal investors in Warren Buffett. We need to have a thing where you and I feel like we are equally responsible and in charge in taking care of our system. The idea that, we're a country that is funded by the rich, I don't buy that. So I'm not a millionaire. I'm not even a one percenter.
And I have no problem with the rich either. Yeah, you're right. They fund the country. Yeah, go. Good luck. Go for it, man.
Yeah, I mean, and, people can do what they want. I applaud everybody doing charity. Just give as you feel you should. Give from your heart. But the idea of what government should be doing, government should be doing what is the business of us. What you and I and everybody working together can provide for government to do. The idea that, we're going to take from the rich to fund government, that doesn't appeal to me. As somebody who's not rich, that bothers my idea of fairness. I want a system in which you and I are doing what we can, and we are providing the services, we are providing the government that we can. It keeps us together, but we are working together, rich and poor together. Because, that's the promise of America. When the people came over here from foreign countries, they were escaping a system of kings and princes. And America's not about that. No more kings, citizens. Citizens. That's what we are. We are citizens.
Right. Here's the thing, too. Getting back to what I just said about that poor woman, that poor person, what I wrote in my blog. If this was 1900, it would have been a different story. It would have been a different thing. I mean, first of all, they wouldn't even do registration, insurance on your car. What are you talking about? But this is what I mean. It's just always the society we live in now is just more and more and more. It's always on top of. It's always just it's just incredible. And I work. But I call myself, my wife always hates it when I do this, but no, I'm working poor. I do the show on a shoestring budget. I do it here in my own home. But I'm that ilk of people. That's why I wrote that in my blog, because I've been there. It's like, yeah, I can't afford this inspection sticker. I can't afford the new tires. I can't afford to get that thing fixed on my truck, but I gotta go to and then sure enough, the blue lights go on in your back window, and now you just hit again. You're just hit, and you're just one police ticket or one new tax away from financial freaking ruin, and it's nuts. You can never ever get ahead. And what I said, you know what? In Massachusetts, as much as it's a Democrat state, and we're liberal, and we're here for the poor, and we're here to help the disenfranchised, no, you're not. You're here to penalize, you're here to tax, and you're here to, arrest and get everybody in there and take whatever you can from them, because you've sent all the jobs out of the state. This brings me back to my earlier question. You've sent all the jobs out of the state. You can't tax these big businesses anymore. So where does your tax base come from? It comes from the poor, the average, the everyday, the fees, the fines, everything else. Go ahead, Dan.
No, I was saying, you're 100% right about that. And the problem with that is that, Massachusetts has been a system where they are an iron fist in a velvet glove. On this velvet glove, they're like, we have all these nice services for you and stuff like that. But if you screw up, the iron fist is going to come through and enforce on you. Yeah. And that's, as terrible as it's been. Like we saw that was a DCF. the DCF can, ignore a kid who's been missing for however long, that's the stuff that's killing us right now, is that when the government does get in there, it has this iron fist of power that is just ruining Massachusetts.
Let's move on to that. That's a very good segue. Let's move on to that. Let's talk about the power of the Massachusetts government. And I've interviewed many candidates. Massachusetts is not alone. We're not alone in this. I spoke to somebody running out in running for Senate out in Oregon. It's the same thing out there. I've spoken to people in Nevada, Texas, everywhere. It's the same thing. The state seems to do the same thing. That where they're just getting into the minutia of everyone's private personal lives. I'm going to be speaking to somebody next week. We're going to talk about American Indians and the way Child Protective Services gets involved in that. It's another expose that I've been doing many times here on the show. But this is it. This is the power of government. It seems like our Constitution is written that the government is supposed to protect us. It's supposed to help us. It's supposed to assist us, leave us alone, and just let us do what we do. But for some strange reason, we have morphed into this all-seeing, all-knowing, that truncated, like on the dollar bill, that truncated seeing eye, where it just runs everybody's lives. And that's where we are today. You talked about Justina Pelletier. I'm thinking of Jeremiah Oliver. My wife doesn't like it, but I've been involved with DCF. I've done a ton of exposés on the Meat and Potato Show about that with other people throughout the country. This intrusion, and as a libertarian yourself, this intrusion, constant in every single minutia of our lives. Go ahead, Dan. Take it from there.
Well, I'll tell you, one of my favorite quotes, I pulled out a couple quotes that I thought I might use. One of my favorite ones is from Robert Heinlein. He said, "The idea of political tags such as royalist, communist, Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, those don't mean anything. The human race divides politically into those who want people to be controlled and those who have no such desire.
Thank you.
The people who want to control you are usually idealists, and they frequently have the highest motives for the greatest good of the greatest number of people. The other people may be surly curmudgeons, they might be suspicious, they might lack an altruism, but they make much better neighbors."
Let me stop you there. Let me stop you there.
Yeah.
Let me stop you there. Leon Trotsky. What did he say during the Russian Revolution? He called these individual tribes and people throughout Russia, as they were trying to institute communism, he called them racist. Well, they were racist. Well, racist? What do you mean? It's because they just want to be left alone. We want to adhere to our own race. We want to adhere to our own culture. We want to be left alone. You guys want to do communism? You go have a good time. Go have a good time. Leave us alone. We're the hell out here in the middle of the woods. Leave us alone. And that's how I feel. And in fact, you know what, Dan? I might actually be a closet libertarian because I'm that same way. Leave me alone. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, I was going to say, you talk about, this idea of Trotsky and sort of communism, and here's the thing. If we think about how we all run our personal families, that is the Marxist phrase, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. The people who can work in the family work. The people who can't work, children, they get taken care of. When your children get old enough so they can do a little bit, they can set the table, they can do some chores, you have them doing that. That's the general principle of actually Marxism. When you work together and you're all in it together in one thing, That's great. But when you expand beyond that, you can't apply that beyond your family scale. So that's where we get to the idea of, what is going to be our motive? Why are we going to work together? How are we going to work together? And that's when we have to say, yeah, you know what? We have more of a structured system now. We have a system where, we understand that what incents people to do things is the idea that they want to better themselves and better their lives. That's more of a capitalistic system where if we give people the opportunity to improve their lives, they will work hard to do it, and we know that's true. We've seen it time and time again. When we talk about the Massachusetts Miracle, I remember when that was a real thing. When we changed things here in Massachusetts, and there's still residual evidence of that. There are a lot of things about Massachusetts that I think are just amazing. So I say this as, we were talking about Texas earlier. I moved here from Texas in 1994. Among all the things that I list about who I am, Texan is still one of them. That upbringing in Texas stuck with me, and there's a lot of state pride in Texas. You see people wear shirts with the state of Texas on it, belt buckles, women wear earrings. That never happens here in Massachusetts, but it should, because Massachusetts has these amazing things about it. And the number one amazing thing about Massachusetts is that we are the home of liberty. There would not have been an American Revolution without John Adams. There would not have been an American Revolution without the Sons of Liberty.
Exactly.
Right? We were the people who were always pushing for that. And that's what our political destiny is to find a way to reclaim that, to wake up the people. And I know that's what you are actively doing with this show, is to wake up the people to our heritage of liberty in Massachusetts.
Yes.
And when that happens, we will take back that golden dome.
Thank you so much for saying that, sir. So let's segue once again. We're coming up to the top of the hour. So I'm actually going to put my foot in your door here, sir.
Yeah.
Talk to Jeff McCormick. Get him on the show. Get him on the show, please. Get him on here, because, you just did an interview, and you've seen my interviews. You know how I play my game here. So
I'll jump on. I'll tell you, the other guy you need to have on is Evan Salchuk.
Yeah, please. I sent all these guys. I sent McCormick, Falchuk. I sent them. You guys, you showed up at that candidate symposium. I sent about 24 interviews to each of those guys. Zero. Nothing. Zero. I never heard from these guys. So I am actually putting my foot in your door, and I am saying, you talk to these guys. Say, yeah.
I will talk to them. I will see what I can do and get them out there. I'll tell you.
Get on Mater's show. Get on the Meat and Potato Show. Anyway, but this segment segues me into the next question. So what's going on for the Libertarians? What's going on for Falchuk, McCormick, heading into November 4th? Talk to us about that.
Well, I'll tell you, it's an interesting thing. To have two well-financed, strong candidates running for governor.
Yeah, they're great guys.
Yeah, they really are. And so I'll tell you, here's the thing about Falchuk. Falchuk is a progressive. He and I differ on a lot of things politically, but he's not a fiscal conservative. But what he is he's fiscally responsible. So unlike a lot of people who say that they want to spend money, he says that he wants to spend money in government, but he refuses to spend money that we can't pay for. Right. So he has a lot of public work projects, but he always has a plan about how he's going to pay for it. Now, I disagree for him on a lot of these things. I don't think that we should do a lot of the projects that he's doing, but I immensely respect a guy who says, we're going to pay for it all, and this is how we're going to do it, and if we can't pay for it, we're not going to do it. You know what? We can, the sort of candidates that I actually can work with. We disagree on many things, but fiscally responsible is so much better than the candidates who we're electing.
Sure, right. So anyway, McCormick. Move on to McCormick.
McCormick has a tremendous business background. He is a smart guy, and he has a good common touch with Massachusetts. Although he's made tons of money, he's a self-made guy. He went to college on an athletic scholarship. He knows what it means to not have a lot of money. So I appreciate that part about him.
Yeah.
At the debate, he said a couple things that I wasn't thrilled with. He wants to get rid of the casinos because of a moral objection. As a libertarian, I don't agree with that. I think if people want to gamble, they're going to drive to someplace where they can gamble anyway.
Right.
And so having a casino in place, that's really not, I don't care about the way government handles that at the state level. I like like the idea that cities can ban it from their own place. You know, like Boston, East Boston chose they didn't want to have a casino. They don't have a casino.
Sure.
But the idea that a city couldn't vote to have one if they wanted to have one, that bothers me. I think Springfield, you know, made a choice for themselves. They can have. They should all be able to have a casino.
Yeah, and as a conservative myself, I think that again, it's just cities and towns. If the city or the town or the state, you know, well, the state actually. Wait a minute. Let me back up. You know, because the state, you know, they've got their hands in the pocket. But you know, a city or town wants to do that. I mean, that should be their business. That should be their own vote. That should be their own thing. Yeah, and we can talk about that on another interview. But Dan, thank you so much for being on the show. So what's next for the Libertarian Party? We're heading into November 4th. What's going on with McCormick, Falchuk? Are they going to be a write-in? Are they what? Talk to us about what happened after the primary. Go ahead.
They're on the ballot, and the most interesting thing that Falchuk is doing is, you know, he's running, and he formed a party called the United Independence Party.
Yes.
Now, he had me into his office about a month ago, and he said, Dan, here's the thing. We know that the Republicans and Democrats are killing us right now.
Yes.
My candidacy is going to get more than 3%. Come November, no matter what happens, we're going to have major party status, which means we're going to open up town committees, which means I want you to run the town committee in Beverly. I want some independent to run the town committee in Worcester. I want, you know, a Green to run the town committee in Brookline. All you guys organize your town committees, and we're going to start building a third party that is the collection of everybody else. So anybody who's an independent, anybody who's a Green, anybody who's a Pirate Party, anybody who's a Libertarian, we want us to all work together with the idea that we should elect somebody who's not a Republican or a Democrat. Now, if we have a place where a Green and a Libertarian want to run in the same place, and of course they're politically completely opposed to each other, but so what? We'll have a primary. That's how we should solve that sort